my favorite biblical scholars has Phyllis Stribble, a brilliant scholar of the Old Testament, has a book called Texts of Terror. Have you ever heard of it? Texts of Terror, which talk about the many biblical passages in which women are sacrificed, raped, beaten, all kinds of horrible violence against them. This text particularly is not in that book, but it is actually a rather terrifying text. We tend to gloss over the fact, and you'll see this on the front cover of your bulletin. I think there's a couple ways to misunderstand the text. And here you have Jesus going after the money changers there, and the table turned over. And we say, oh, those bad money changers. Right? And in the Synoptic Gospels, in Synoptic Matthew, Mark, and Luke, the cleansing of the temple takes place before the Passion. And do you remember what Jesus says in the Synoptic Gospels? Thou shalt not turn my Father's house into a, who remembers? Den of thieves. Den of thieves. Now here we have a different take on it, but in the Synoptics, the den of thieves. Now, we get the den of thieves, we think, oh, they were robbing people. Now wait. Do thieves rob in the den? What do thieves do in the den? They rob out in the world, and the den is the place where they hide. The den of thieves is the place where the thieves come to hide and pretend they're something that they're not. This is actually quite a dangerous text, if you think about it. First, we have to understand, for our 21st century ears and eyes, non-Jewish, Western, 21st century ears and eyes, it's difficult to comprehend because precisely the center of the service, the worship for Jewish folks many times was sacrifice. It was a sacrifice. The people who were selling animals were making possible that sacrifice. And you could tell your status in life by what size of animal you could buy. By the way, a dove, a Jonah, sign of Jonah was the sign of the dove, was the poor person's sacrifice. It was the cheapest one that you could buy. And then up from there, goat, sheep, lamb, etc. They would buy the animals first for the sacrifice. And the money changers, far from being robbers, does anyone have any kind of piece of money with them? $1, $10, a coin? Anyone? Let's just take a look, shall we? Pull out a bill, any bill. There's one. Open it up. Open it up. There. Now, what do you see on the face of that bill? What do we have? May I? I'll give it back, I promise. What do we see? We see a graven image. It was illegal for Jews to give an offering with a graven image on it. Remember that on the coins were Caesar's head. Caesar was considered a god. Right? That's when Jesus said, pass me the coin, whose image you see on it, Caesar, render unto Caesar, right? Okay, well, Caesar was considered a god, so you don't give to God something that bears a graven image. So the money changers, far from being robbers, were actually making offerings possible. Because the people could not give an offering with a graven image on it. So they would change their money with graven image for something with a plant, a flower, something much more innocuous, and not Caesar's head, who was considered a god. It gets trickier. But wait, there's more. So the whole basis of worship, which was sacrificing to an angry God, appeasing that angry God, in order that I might reap benefits, and oh, by the way, if I buy a lamb, that shows what kind of person I am, compared to buying a pigeon or a dove, which also sort of ranks me in my status of life. So I can show off to my neighbors my economic standing by what kind of animal I purchased for sacrifice, and how much money I would exchange in order to appease this angry God. And so we kind of try to dump on the money changers as though they were thieves. No, they weren't. What Jesus is doing here is changing the whole course of worship, making business as usual in the worship situation impossible. No offerings, no no sacrifice. And remember, the tithe by Jewish law, tithe was required. The tithe was your temple tax. This was for the Levites who were not landed. Remember, all the 12 tribes, the Levites were not landed. They were not given land because they were taking care of the temple. So the tithe went to care for the Levites who were caring for the temple. Your offering was on top of your tithe. By Jewish law, offering is over and above the 10% that you gave to the temple. Big business here, people. Right? In the agrarian culture, if you don't have land, you don't have money, you can't survive. Yes? So what Jesus is doing here, far from punishing evildoers, and I disagree, I'm sorry, with the interpretation that's printed. It's not about the commercialization of religion. It's about religion itself. What it's about. And what we're here to do. Are we here to appease an angry God, to make sacrifices, to negotiate with God's grace and God's forgiveness? Is really at the basis of this whole text. Scary stuff. Because when Jesus turns over those tables, he's making business as usual impossible. And so it begs the question, I was one of those annoying children who always said, but why? But why? But what are those people doing there? But why, then, is the but why of worship, of coming together? If we are not here to appease an angry God, to make sacrifices according to our sins, then what are we doing when we worship? Jesus, in this act of cleansing the temple, was clearing the way to try to uncover not a mean, angry God which needed to be appeased and sacrificed to, but rather a loving, living God. And at the same time brings in this whole play on words of the temple as his own body. Well, destroy this temple and I will raise it up again in 3 days. It's a reference to his passion, death, crucifixion, and rising again. So Jesus' body somehow gets mixed into this what and wherefore of worship. To the fact that when we celebrate at the table, now here's a children's sermon question. What does it mean to remember? What is to remember? When we remember something, what do we do? What's remember? Seems like an easy question, right? Remember, we generally think of memories or remembering as warm, fuzzy thoughts. No? Thinking about someone, reminding someone. In a body, what is a member? It's a part of the whole, yes? My arm is a member. My hands, my fingers, my ears, my feet, my legs, they're all members of this body. And so when Jesus calls us to come and remember, this is my body given for you. When you do this, you will remember me. That is to say, take this body and blood, take it into yourself, and then you will be put into that body as a member. Arm, leg, hand, foot, finger, and remember Christ in that action.